Because yeah, defining community, great question. And I think community, we can use sociological framing techniques, which I've done in the past, but I think you'll see the community come forward as we move through this. So, but what I'm targeting largely is women in a rural context, and there's a lot of private land ownership in the United States. So women are often, in ways, have opportunities to engage in climate smart forestry. So, yeah, the platform in which to reach this community is Women Owning Woodlands, which is there's almost, I think, a network in each state. And this is backed by the U.S. Forest Service and the National Woodland Owners Association. So it's a great group. And this project with Patricia and the team is complementary to my other extension program called Forest Owner Carbon and Climate Education Program, which is, it's more broad in terms of reaching landowners in general in the Eastern US. We have about 13 extension institutions that participate in contributing to this program. So a lot of co-creation of information. Climate smart forestry is highly interdisciplinary subject matter. So I am the social scientist. I contribute in that way, and we're looking to kind of just help bring more awareness and opportunities to forest landowners. So just sort of like an overview, this is my one slide about climate smart forestry, but it's really about it's managing forests based on their current condition so that they can either address mitigation, climate change mitigation, or are able to adapt to climate change. And forest management is key here. So active forest management and proactive planning is often needed in order to implement any sort of mitigation or adaptation strategy. And forests are living systems, so they're very dynamic. The biggest way to keep a forest a carbon sink is to keep it healthy and to keep it around. So, preventing land use conversion and managing it to protect forest health is going to provide positive benefits into the future, but it can also be managed to sequester additional carbon that can be sold as offsets in a market setting and provide income for the landowner. So there's all kinds of opportunities. So the problem statement when it comes to women and forest land ownership, I already highlighted that private forest lands are expected to be key players. About 70% of forests are privately owned. However, land ownership has been not been an opportunity for a lot of women historically. However, now in the last few generations, ownership of land has been including women more and more. Over half of couples own land, and so women are, assigned, ownership. But usually the men have the primary decision-making roles, and this just has to do with traditional roles, once again, about whose jobs are to be outside and whose are to be inside, and these kinds of things. So so women don't often have these formative experiences in forestry. It is not uncommon. So I'll just point out that forest land owners are generally around 60 years in age, and women frequently outlive men. So there are periods in which women come into forest ownership unintentionally. They can inherit land, they can get it from their husband. More and more women are intentionally buying forests, but this unintentional ownership is not uncommon. And forested properties are at the highest risk of mismanagement during that period of land transfer from one owner to another. That is where the risk of unsustainable harvest or land use conversion is most likely to occur. So thinking about this, we want to get women involved in forest management and also thinking in a proactive sense about, under climate change. But the literature has shown with women forest owners is that they have limited formative experiences, low confidence. They don't feel like they belong in these spaces because forestry tends to be male dominated. And programs are that, for training are usually geared towards men in the context that they're set up in a way where, the kind of, what do I want to call it, like power dynamic is more comfortable for men than for women. And so moving forward, we wanted to create an extension program for women that was in a context that was more comfortable for them, especially when there's low confidence and kind of feeling like you don't belong. And so I'll share with you our needs assessment study we did and the co-design approach. And then I'll go over how we designed the program itself and then give you some information of the data we collected. We did this program and we set it up for Pennsylvania and South Carolina. And so that's the co-creation process. But we've only collected data in South Carolina right now. So that's what I'll show you. Let's see. My graduate student, Kreye Nupane, did interviews, so qualitative research with women forest owners in the network that we're collaborating with, and to understand how they thought about forest and how they thought about climate change. And when it comes to climate change, women had very mixed opinions. And just as a reminder, these women are generally mature and rural, and so relatively conservative. Climate change is a thing, but it's not the most pressing issue in their life. But what do they value about their forest? They really valued that it was a system that supported multiple types of living things. It provided services to society, clean water, clean air. It was a place that was really important for family bonding, and being outside and being together was something that they really valued about their forest. Some of the challenges were, again, what we saw in the literature. They didn't really know much about forest management. I mean, even they're part of this network, there's this low confidence. And I'm like, if you're part of this network, you probably know more than most people. But there was still this concern, I don't know a lot. Language barriers, meaning terminology, not understanding when someone says a select harvest, what does that mean? And it can mean a lot of different things. Lack of capital in, investing into their land. That's pretty common in land ownership. You're land rich, but, cash poor. And then just a lack of trust. Are professionals going to take me seriously when I go ask them for help? So this was the issue. How do we bring climate change information to this group where climate change is not that important? And so I got together with some community members that are listed on the left. We sent out a request for women to participate in this co-design process, and we had some criteria. We wanted them to sort of demonstrate leadership as well as some experience in forest ownership, at least. And then the other program leaders were my colleagues in Extension at Clemson and at University of Florida, as well as here at Penn State. And we had a series of meetings in which we shared with those community contributors the information from the needs assessment, the literature, what the literature says. We shared with them what kind of resources are available in Extension, including climate smart forestry content, and said, how can we build a program that's going to appeal to rural women and forest owners? And so this is the logic model. I just put it in there because that's how we kind of built it. But now the next slides are going to kind of show you what that ended up being. So the way we designed the program was that it would be on legacy planning. That was something all the women pretty much get behind. They're all about, protecting the forest into the future, as well as supporting their family in the future as well. And so making it climate smart is just the active management part of legacy planning, which involves some legal components too, and communication with your family members about what you want to do in the future, those kinds of things. Because a lot of them just didn't feel very confident in their knowledge and experience in forest management, we knew we had to design an atmosphere that was going to be safe and comfortable. So we set up these objectives to provide information to support understanding or support knowledge, language, and motivation around climate smart forestry and legacy planning. So two topics, we kind of put them together. We provide planning documents, and we also give them opportunities to network with peers and forestry professionals. So that's what we want them to ultimately have. It's about, motivation, ability to plan, and being able to network with professionals are kind of our end goals. So the approach we designed was to foster group discussions with women landowners that are led by their peers. So these are spaces where there are no professionals leading the conversation. It is the women having conversations, guided conversations, because we train one of their peers to guide it. But they get to look at the materials, reflect on them together, and do group work together to come up with their plan and vision for their forest. And so this was implemented over 3 weeks. And I will let you know on the logic model here is what we expected to be the short-term, mid, and long-term impacts. And I think this is a really important slide because we often get this sense like, well, in extension, we need to teach somebody how to do something and then they go do it, and that's impact. And while that is impact, that's sort of like they already had to have a lot of motivation already and a lot of experiences already in order to take action. But we're not talking about women who are ready to take action yet. What they need really is to establish their values and priorities for forest management, understand what is climate smart forestry, what is legacy planning, like what is it? And they need to find their voice. They need to talk about it, and they need to be initiated into the forestry sector, into the group, as being seen as a legitimate contributor in the conversation in this space. So it's very much about early engagement strategies and initiating people into a space where they historically have not necessarily been welcomed. And so the long-term impact is, that landowners are more engaged, and that opportunities to get, incentives from climate smart forestry, be they from the state or from private sector, that those incentives are more equitably distributed. So the way we had it set up is that there are the FOSSI program, or this particular project, we provide the platform in which to manage these discussion groups. And our collaborators, in this case, it was Clemson Extension Services, they were the ones that brought the people together. And so just to sort of like describe it a little bit more cogently here, we provided registration services, the assignments and discussion guides, the extension resources library, and evaluation of their program. And our collaborators at Clemson distributed the invitations for these discussion groups within their network, held meeting spaces, and identified forestry professionals to invite, and also helped to develop the materials that would be read. And so there's a lot of different participants in this. There's the facilitators who are training the group leaders, who are, setting up discussions with the learners, the forest owners, and their families. And there's also the forestry professionals that come at the end and say, this is what I do, and this is how you can contact me. So it did require quite a bit of materials had to be created. But the content, the training part, was already in existing extension materials. So it was more, we had to set up the registration. We set up a quiz to help the women understand their priorities for forest management, and then these discussion guides. So these are the kinds of materials, and the evaluation surveys. These are the kinds of materials that were generated from this project. And you can see here in stage 1, we're assembling the group. So we use a Qualtrics survey to have forest owners register. They got a letter of invitation from their extension network leader, and said, here's a program if you'd like to be part of it. So they come to Qualtrics and register. And part of the Qualtrics registration process included the forest values quiz to help them understand their priorities And it also was a section where they could volunteer to be a peer group leader. And so they would attend a separate training to prepare them for that. And so here's the quiz. It's a two-step quiz. First, they list what do they like about their forest. So it covers a wide variety of things, ecosystem services, as well as sort of like community benefits, meaning just being part of the forestry community. And what they did is they listed what they thought, what they like about forest, and then what they were concerned about. And then we got to compare the two to help them identify some priorities, because if they thought it was important and they were concerned about it, that should be at the top of their list. That's part of the reason why people don't really start thinking about a management plan. They just get overwhelmed. Like, where do I start? What is my goal? You know, and this was really trying to help them set those priorities. So the curriculum was a contribution from multiple institutions. Clemson had a lot of great materials just on basic forest management. They also have, Penn State and Clemson had extension resources on legacy planning, tips for how to conduct what it is, and then tips for how to engage in that process. And then, of course, my program, the Forest Owner Carbon and Climate Education Program, had plenty of articles on climate smart forestry and carbon markets and opportunities there. So that's our library of resources. And what we do is we got together and we said, this is what people valued in that quiz. And then we just basically put together a package of articles for the women to read. And so the individual activity that the women engaged in before the group activity was to review the reading assignment. So it was just 2 or 3 articles, short articles that they would review before getting together. And when they met in Zoom, that's where we had our group discussions. And the peer leader would guide them through some planned questions that help them kind of articulate what it is that they learned, what were some of the, what was of interest to them, and then how would they like apply what they learned to what their priorities are as far as on that priorities quiz. They had a forest visioning plan where they would document their conversations. And these were private documents. They aren't like, they could share them or not, It was really open-ended how the group wanted to engage with each other. And then at the end, they would get to meet with forestry professionals. So in South Carolina, they got to meet with their state forester. They also got to meet with some forestry extension professionals. And one carbon markets person, I believe. So they got to see, hey, these are real people. And they all happen to be women too, which was nice. And they knew who to call. Like, I have a question about my forest. I know who to call because I met this person. And we had an evaluation survey at the end, which is what I'll share with you now. So 10 people responded to the survey, and I have a poster here. I'm willing to share it if anyone's interested, but just sort of as a summary. Most people were curious. They just wanted to explore options, which is why they got involved in the discussion groups, which is great because that's the purpose of those discussion groups, was really kind of to broaden their exposure to climate smart forestry and legacy planning. And let's see. These are the scalar questions that we use to measure that collaborative learning experience, that group work. That collaborative learning experience has both psychological as well as academic kind of impacts. And so in the left table here, these statements measuring collaborative learning benefits were just about the conversations about legacy planning. And so, participants felt free to communicate their opinions on a scale of 1 to 5. Mean score 4 means that generally everyone agreed that they were able to communicate their opinions. Once again, most people agreed they enjoyed listening to other people's point of view. Their understanding was broadened. Some of them felt like they learned something from each other, and they feel more comfortable about talking with their peers about these issues in the future. And so I would say the legacy planning definitely, this is some challenging stuff to talk about when you're going to die and who's going to do what with your forest, and what do you expect from your children? So these are not light topics. And so, the fact that they, enjoyed themselves and felt like they were able to communicate is really a great impact. Moving over to forest carbon and climate change, again, it was all scores above 4. And there was an enjoyment talking about climate change. So it's so interesting. I think when we get together and have these conversations, there is more optimism than kind of learning about it in the news or having it pointed at you, but being able to verbalize your opinions and views on what can be a challenging topic is really can be a positive experience. And so here's change in perceived knowledge, attitudes, confidence. Once again, it was on a 5-point scale, and just like Patricia's slide, she showed it was the score before and the score after. So we're looking for a change, hopefully in a positive direction. With the legacy planning, confidence in understanding legacy planning topics increased. The pleasure of learning about these things increased. Comfort about talking to their family about legacy planning also increased, and making decisions in the future. So went up a whole point on a 5-point scale. So I would say that is really great. Also an increase on forest carbon and climate change topics. And this one had a few more questions that related to climate change, a couple more questions that related to communication to different categories of people. So like their community, to their family, to contributing to mitigation and adaptation strategies, increase in understanding, increase in like enjoying learning about the subject matter. And some of the biggest changes was the skills to talk to family and friends about climate change. And I'm like, that's so great, because we cannot move into a society that addresses climate change till most everybody's on board. And part of that involves talking. And right now, climate change is sort of like a taboo word in a lot of more conservative or traditional communities, because it has so much uncertainty about it, and among other reasons. So encouraging people to talk about it is just really, really great. Okay, I'm gonna finish up right here. Here's some comments. I would say one of my favorite comments is this big one here, where the respondent said she only really thought about her forest in 2 different ways, but now she was looking to expand to think more about interested in the forest landowner community and in habitat management, which is great, because before she was just interested in income and non-timber forest products. The comment down below here said that her brother was the one that talked to the forester, but now she's like, I know some stuff. So I was like, great, she's entering the conversation. This is evidence of being willing to now enter that conversation. And then the other 2 comments basically are talking about how they liked the system that helped them set up their ideas and start making a plan. So what we learned is that climate change solutions should help advance the values and goals of the community. So put the legacy planning first, and then built the climate change curriculum with it. We don't have trust issues when working with women in an extension context. It's just that's not the barrier. But I will say there was a little bit of difference there was concern about the political agenda that came up, and there was a difference based on age and why is it we're focusing on women. And this was an interesting space. I can talk more about it if you want, but it wasn't a really barrier, but there was definitely questions like, why are we asking women about this, or being involved, just women's only groups, and the last thing is, don't discount the value of initiating people to take part in conversations. So that concludes my presentation. If you're interested in doing something like this in your community, I can certainly be of help. We have a system in place, and this co-design process is just part of the programming. We're building it all the time, depending on which discussion groups we're working with.
Oh, that was fantastic. I think this is my favorite event so far. I mean, just even talking about providing childcare in order to have families come, or helping people find their own voice in a new field of consideration. These are very commonsensical things. but sometimes we forget them. And I just want to applaud you both for bringing those very real pragmatic things to the fore so that we can really engage the collective force, because I do think there is a common sense to climate change, and I can see that you both of you are really beginning to nail that common sense. And so, and I wish I hadn't used the word nail, but you know what I mean. Um, so thank you.
I'll say that this is the first time I've done any research that's like gender specific and working in this space. And I think that it's so valuable because they're right there. The women are right there on the forest lands, and all they have to do is just say something, you know, can we just think about this way, Dad? What about this, brother? And it's once again, it's like defining the problem. It's not this huge, I mean, there are underserved communities that have significant, socioeconomic, constraints. But then there's others that can also make a real difference where it's just about increasing their confidence. So that was something that I've been learning to appreciate, is the nuance, I guess, that's different for every community. And I really like, Patricia, how the Latino community is just so like, let's have a good time. Let's make this a party. Let's make this about family. And I'm like, it's just so different everywhere you go. And being sensitive, culturally competent, I guess is the word, to make that part of the program so that it feels like their program.
I also think it's neat, Melissa, how you're thinking about legacy planning. It hasn't really even occurred to me how hard it is to broach that subject, let alone think about how to manage land that results from that subject, or think about how to manage that land that results from that subject to have a long-term climate impact. Like, there's so many temporal layers, which you made very clear in your presentation, but it's also just so poignantly present, like the decisions that one makes. And so I think it's just, I'm curious, in terms of cart and horse, did you come first to the legacy planning, or were you coming from climate and then you realized that legacy planning was this interesting co-joiner
Mm-hmm.
in a trajectory that needed attention, and sort of climate just sort of came along with it?
It's all about my collaborators. So Allison Muth is the leader in legacy planning at Penn State here. And of course, I do the carbon climate stuff where, new money is coming in. And we're like, well, what is the number one challenge of forest management? Obviously, it's making it financially feasible. And then another challenge is at that land transfer. Forests exist on longer timescales than humans do. And I think in the US, average land tenure is around 16 years. Now, some people will own for like maybe 20 years or 30 years, but that's a really short period of time. And so not thinking about the forest for the next generation is self-limiting. And so it definitely, in the context of, forest under climate change, the two really did make a lot of sense. And they were just kind of separated parts of extension. And we're like, we'll put them together.
So I see there's a question from Lynn. I'm interested in doing a similar approach with pollinator habitat. We'll be working with South Carolina 4-H youth development. Would love to discuss further. I'm also working with leaders with native bees in Washington. Would love to hear, I would love to think about how we could build collaborative opportunities. So Lynn, you're in North Carolina and in Washington State. Am I understanding that? Or Washington, DC?
With the women community, is that, I'm not sure which, starting with the community, kind of working that way, because I know it's easy to go like, we gotta support pollinators. So defining the community, I guess, would be helpful.
I think there's room for all kinds of collaboration.
Oh,
So
yeah.
this event has gone over time, and I think I'm gonna put Patricia's email in the chat. But I think you should feel confident or comfortable contacting any of us.
Oh, yeah. definitely.
Uh, but I'm gonna close it out because I didn't actually realize it was 4:06, and I try to stick to our time limit so everybody can move on. I just want to remind everyone that Aging and Climate is next month. I put the registration in the chat. Please give us feedback both about the structure of the presentation today, as well as any in the past, and also give us feedback for things that you would like to be presented in the future. We're trying to cultivate a whole range of perspectives on how to move forward so everybody finds a friend to work with, work for, and work on behalf, and be inspired and be inspiring. So let us know and join us at NECI if you would like to join us. I'm going to call it quits right there. And my very best to you all. Have a good day.